Hello again. We are Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16, ready to preview what will be the game of the year so far in the SEC. So much hype around it. We're doing this a week and a half before kickoff. So keep that in mind if things have changed. Anyway, Georgia travels to Alabama, 6:30 Central on ABC. Now, here's what's really interesting, Chase. Georgia, which has got, a 41-game winning streak in SEC regular season play, is a 2.5-point favorite with an over-under of 51.5, which makes for an implied final score of along the lines of Georgia 27, Alabama 25. Now, my model, which is put together by a bunch of mainstream analytics models, FPI, SP Plus, Kelly Ford, those kind of things, it's 5 of them. He's got Alabama by nearly 5. Now, you would think with these programs, with the information we have, a 7.5-point gap at this point in the season between the model and the Vegas line is just fascinating to me. What do you think accounts for that?
I think a lot. I feel like Alabama is, yes, they're on people's radar, but I feel like people had to really get a feel for what this Alabama team is. And we saw them open up really good against Western Kentucky, struggled at moments with South Florida, big win over Wisconsin. And so people are trying to catch on to what is this Alabama team? What can we do with them? Georgia, we've seen them come out great, huge win over Clemson. They snuck away with a win over Kentucky. But I felt like it was just trying to find out first kind of what this Alabama team is about. I feel like it's taken people a couple of weeks to figure out and partially still figuring out what this Alabama team's about. I love how both teams have bye weeks, though, heading into this big game next week. I think, obviously they'll spend a lot of time working on themselves, working on their own things, but they'll have a little extra time to work on their opponent, which I think will make we'll up the ante in this one a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of confusion as you go into these games with both these teams. I think with Georgia last week, going to a Kentucky team that looked like it had no shot against Georgia, but always plays them close. I mean, a 13-12 game, Georgia didn't throw the ball very well. Now, look, they were playing against the best pass defense that either team has seen so far. So I think you have to take that for granted. Kentucky's also kind of been Georgia's kryptonite, so to speak. That's stretching it because Kentucky hasn't beaten Georgia, but they've always played that game closer. So I think maybe part of the confusion is we just don't know what to make of Georgia yet. I mean, I'm going to give you something here that's kind of interesting in my model of what they were points above average every week. Coming into the Clemson game, 31.7 points above average. Coming into the Tennessee Tech game, 32 points above average. Coming into the Kentucky game, 29.6 points above average. Last week, they fell 3.5 points. They're 26.2 points above average coming into this one. Now, look, I don't know what to make of that yet. We have seen Georgia coast through some games recently, and you think maybe they're not quite the dominant team they were, and then the minute you say that, they put their foot on the accelerator and just run over everything in their path. So I think, back to my question, I think there's some confusion about what these teams are just based on the performance, but I think the line also recognizes, hey, this is a Georgia team that's won a whole lot of national championships recently.
Yeah, and they've been dominant, and so I think that goes into effect. But you look at this Georgia team this year, and they're replacing a lot, but they got some really good pieces in replacing some of these guys at receiver, on defense as well. And I really like what Kirby has done. He's been able to reload every year, and it's remarkable what he's done there at Georgia and what he's doing right now. This is a really good Georgia team, and there's no reason to worry about Georgia following that Kentucky game. I feel like they're still in a good spot. They learned a lot about themselves. They're going to be playing angry next week when they hit the field in Tuscaloosa because of the last time they were on the field and how close it was there with Kentucky. And so, I think that is another reason that we can look forward to this game is because I think Georgia's going to be playing mad following what they did in Lexington.
Yeah, and both teams having a bye week makes it interesting too. All right, before we break down the matchup, it's sponsored by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff. Get in on our $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with over one of 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. All right, when we do our previews, Chase, we usually start with the road team's offense versus the home team's defense. So I'll pull up some numbers of interest here. While I'm doing that, let me just start with your thoughts on Alabama's, or I guess it'll be in this case, Georgia's offense in that matchup against Alabama's defense.
Yeah, once again, looking good. I mean, Carson Beck is 680 yards on the year, 68% completion rate. He's 56 for 82, 7 touchdowns. He's only been sacked 1 time. So I think you can credit the offensive line there for making that happen. Trevor Etienne, a lot of attention on him coming into the year, and he has 157 yards. Nate Frazier's ran the ball well, 113 yards and a touchdown. Branson Robinson, a couple of touchdowns. And then there's been a lot of guys to touch the ball as far as pass catchers go. Dominic Lovett, Arian Smith, Dylan Bell, Lawson Lucky, London Humphreys, Colby Young. They've all done their job of scoring. Dominic Lovett has been a big target. And so, they're deep at receiver. They get a lot of guys touching the ball. And I really like this offense. They're quick. They can they'll spread you out and make you work. They could pick you apart too, because Carson Beck is that kind of quarterback. So I love what I see from Georgia's offense.
Yeah, and one note, of course, that if you follow the SEC, you probably know Etienne missed a game with a suspension. Since he's been back, he leads him in net rushing yards, 157. Also leads him in rushing average, 6.5 per carry. So keep that in mind too. That there's a weapon at their disposal that they have not had completely. All right, I'm going to read you the numbers before we talk about Alabama's defense. Here's how they match up statistically. Georgia's offense so far, or the team is scoring 31.7 points a game. Georgia only getting 58 snaps a game. That's kind of interesting. Hasn't turned it over yet. Georgia passes it 55% of the time, averaging 7.9 yards per passing play, 5.7 yards per rushing play. Those are sack adjusted, 6.9 yards per play on the whole. Alabama's defense, here are your numbers. Very impressive. Alabama averaging 8.7 points a game against 74 snaps. That the offense has been on the defense has been on the field more than you'd think, which I think accounts. We look at raw numbers sometimes, and when you look at those, Alabama's not as impressive. I think a lot of this just Alabama's red zone defense has been outstanding. Bama forces turnovers 1.8% of the time. Teams pass it 52% of the time against Alabama. And the yards per rush play against Alabama, 4.1. Yards per pass play against Alabama, this is incredible, 2.6. And 3-point yards per snap on the whole. There's a big discrepancy when you look at total offense and total defense versus per play. For example, I'll just give it to you this way. South Florida game, total offense, Alabama 393 to 303. Wisconsin 409 versus 290. So not super impressive when you go there. Now Western Kentucky, very lopsided, 600 to 145. But I think what Alabama's doing, Chase, is it's keeping offenses on the field. But when they get down into scoring territory, they give you nothing.
Yeah. You hit it on the head there with the red zone defense. It's been incredible to sit there and watch. And yes, teams will drive down the field, but the amount of times that this Alabama defense has either forced them to go for it on 4th down and a turnover on downs, or just kick a field goal and not get the 6 points. Credit Alabama's defense. They've done a really good job at that. I really like Keon Sabb, the defensive back for Alabama. He has a couple of picks this year, 11 total tackles. He's been really fun to watch. I like Gian Campbell, Deontay Lawson, the linebackers. Of course, Malachi Moore, we knew coming into the season, he was the guy everybody's talking about, kind of the anchor of this defense. He's done well. I like the defensive line, Tim Smith, Latham, Tim Keenan, Overton. Those guys of the defensive front have been working hard as well, and I thought they did good at Wisconsin the other day. So I like what I'm seeing from this Alabama defense so far this year.
Feels like the key might be stopping Etienne in the running game.
Yeah.
With Keenan and Smith and those guys up front, they've got a lot of experience. I don't know what's exactly going to happen, but when I'm thinking of likely things, that's probably like the first matchup I circle here.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to circle. I mean, I think Georgia's going to have to run the ball a good bit, but I feel like this Alabama defense is in a spot right now, and especially I feel like the way they played Saturday at Wisconsin, that they're ready for that. I really like this defensive front.
All right, let's switch sides of the matchup. When Alabama's got the ball, Jalen Milroe's just been a one-man wrecking crew. Raylen Williams has really started to pop as the guy that everybody thought he would be. He looks like the next in line of those great Alabama receivers. Committee backfield, but I mean, Georgia's defense, just as usual, has been outstanding. I'll start with Georgia's defense in the matchup. They're allowing 6 points a game, just 49 snaps. So that's kind of interesting. Georgia's defense has really been staying off the field. 2.1% turnover rate, a 50-50 split in the run and pass against. Georgia is allowing 5.6 yards per running play. That's kind of interesting. That's adjusted for sacks, just 2.7 per pass play, 4.2 per play total. And Alabama's offense, here are the numbers. Alabama is on the field 63 snaps, averaging 49 points a game. A lot of that padded, of course, by the Western Kentucky win, but still been put up a lot of points in the other two games too. 63 snaps a game, 2.1% turnover rate. Alabama averaging 6.5 yards per rushing play, 8.8 per pass. They run it 62% of the time and 7.4 yards per play. Chase, I apologize. That's a lot I threw at you at once, but we really need to dig into the numbers in this matchup because I think this is such an evenly matched game, and I'm just trying to figure out what pops. But to me, Georgia not being as effective against the rush is kind of interesting when you take sacks out of it. That's a very un-Georgia-like performance.
Yeah, and let me tell you, Alabama's going to run the football. Jalen Milroe, they're incorporating more design runs and getting him really active in the run game in this offense led by Caleb Ward, Nick Sheridan. Jam Miller, running back for Alabama, has 265 yards this season, 3 touchdowns. Justice Haynes, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Milroe, 156 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns on the ground. This is
Hey, Chase, got to pause it.
So this is a team that likes to run the ball, Chris, at Alabama. And then you get started on the receivers, who are so much fun to watch at Alabama, starting with Raylen Williams. You mentioned him. He's got 4 touchdowns of the year, 285 yards on 10 catches. This guy, he's 17 years old. He reclassified. He was at Saraland High School down in the Mobile area of Alabama, and he should be playing high school football right now. And I know the teams that are on the Saraland schedule are certainly glad he's not, because he is explosive, and he has had a great start to his career at Alabama. And then Jeremy Bernard, Kobe Prentice, all guys who are able to catch the ball and make it happen. And Kendrick Law as well, catching a few balls. And so this Alabama offense, they're starting to get on a roll. They're starting to figure things out. And I'm interested to see what they're able to do against Georgia. How can they get into the secondary of Georgia? How can they avoid sacks? I think that's a big thing coming into this game. Look, the Alabama offensive line, there's no way around it, has struggled at parts of this season. They looked much better against Wisconsin when they had Kadyn Proctor back, when they were all healthy. They struggled against South Florida. There's no way around that, with penalties and with Jalen Milroe just not having any time to work. And so if they protect him, I think that will definitely be a huge bonus for Alabama.
Yeah, I think the interesting dynamic in this game is the Milroe dynamic and the protection dynamic. And boy, there's a lot to unpack here. Like if you look on Georgia's stat sheet, just as it reads, Georgia's allowing 3.1 yards per rush. Great rush defense, right? Well, if you consider that 79 of those yards have been in sacks, which are passing plays, and you add that back in and you take those sacks out as rushes, the number against the run changes to 5.6 yards per carry. That's a big difference, right? I mean, you don't usually see something like that. So it says, well, Georgia's vulnerable against the run. Well, here's the other issue. Georgia can really, really get after you with about 42 guys on that roster can rush the passer. That's an exaggeration, but that's always the way it's been. And Alabama has had so many fits protecting Milroe. I mean, it even goes back a little bit before this year. We know about the injuries on the line. Proctor missed a couple games. That's the dynamic that's really interesting, is Alabama can really run the ball. Georgia struggled to stop true running plays, but Georgia can really, really hit Alabama where it's had some issues. But at the same time, Georgia's not seen a guy like Jalen Milroe either. The guys they've seen are more pocket passing guys and whatever Tennessee Tech had, who cares, right? But that is where I think this matchup is fascinating.
It will be. And I think that the other's weakness maybe is the other's strength. And so I think that's what's going to make this matchup so much fun next Saturday night, just because it's hard to know how each team will respond to those things you were just talking about. I mean, that it makes for an incredible matchup.
Yeah, and just to illustrate my point, guys with at least one sack so far: Raylen Wilson, KJ Bolden, Jalon Walker, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, Christen Miller, Jordan Thomas, Gabe Harris Jr. So you just don't ever know quite where the pass rush could come from. I mean, Georgia just is spitting out athletes like crazy on defense these days. And that didn't include Mykel Williams, who's, you know, the All-American that was supposed to be their best pass rusher coming the year. He's got 2 tackles for loss, but no sacks yet. No, he's got 3 pressures. Walker, really the guy. He's got 13 pressures. That's unbelievable through 3 games.
Yeah, it is. And again, that they've got to put pressure on Alabama all night long. I think they will. That's the game plan. But if they can do that, that's going to cause a lot of havoc back there for the Crimson Tide backfield.
You know, we don't spend a lot of time talking about special teams, but Alabama brought in maybe the best kicker in the country. Georgia's got a guy in Peyton Woodring who's been super consistent, punter in Brett Thorson, who's one of the best in the country, averaging nearly 50 yards a kick. 6 of his 11 punts have been over 50 yards. Anything stand out to you on special teams here?
I think this is an interesting thing because it could come down to this. You know, it's a game that you feel like maybe could come down to special teams. I think both teams are sitting in a very good situation though with special teams, and you know, you hate for games to come down to that. Yeah, it's exciting, but a lot of pressure on both special team units if it does. But yeah, I think both teams are sitting in a very good situation.
All right, let's get on to picks. Tell me who you're taking and why.
I'm going to take Alabama. I know a lot of people are going to roll with Georgia. I'm taking Alabama. They're at home. I like the way Alabama's been able to move the ball, especially in that Wisconsin game. I think the defense can lock it down, can get it done. And I know both teams have an extra week to get everybody healthy, but I feel like that offensive line for Alabama needs maybe another week to get healthy, to work on what they're going to face with Georgia's defensive front and the amount of pressure that they're going to get. I'm not trying to let history dictate my pick here, but Alabama has been able to be successful over Georgia a lot in recent history. And even when Georgia won, there was a lot of guys out for Alabama in that championship game. I think Alabama wins this one, and I think it'll be close. I think it'll be a fantastic game once again. I think Alabama gets it done in Tuscaloosa.
I think I'm also going to go with Alabama. I think this is a game where I would just take the home team regardless. Now, if it's a neutral site game, I don't know. Of course, Alabama won the last time they played a neutral site game not long ago. Now, my fear where I'm wrong is the pass protection issue. There's this little alarm going off in the back of my head going, they have had fits protecting Milroe, and Georgia can really get after you, and a turnover or something like that can swing a game. I'm going to go with Alabama because it's the home team. But you know what? These are the games that are so much fun, Chase, where you sit there and you go, man, I don't know. And, if it's wrong, I should have thought about this or that. And that's what makes college football great.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited already, and we're a week and a half out.
Yeah, can't wait to see it. This will be the game of the year in college football to date. We will be talking about when it's over. Every Saturday night, we do a live stream where we wrap up all the games of the day. Well, not all the games of the day. Not all of them are finished when we're doing it, but we do the best we can. And we also cover basketball and baseball year-round. If you like our content, hit the subscribe button. That costs you nothing. Hit the like button. That helps our analytics. And tell a friend. If you're interested in advertising, we reach millions of people every year through all of our content. Caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.